The lecture hall buzzed with quiet conversation as dozens of alien scientists settled into their seats. Dr. Wren adjusted the holographic display with one crystalline appendage, pulling up charts and diagrams that floated in the air above the stage. The Quillen researcher had spent 3 months preparing this presentation on comparative biology, and today's topic was particularly interesting to the assembled crowd. Yao Wen sat near the back of the hall, arms crossed loosely over his chest. He had attended these medical conferences for 2 years now, ever since Earth had joined the Galactic Council and started the scientific exchange program. By now, he knew what was coming. He always did when humans were the subject. Thank you all for attending today's session. Wren's voice chimed through the room, a sound like wind through crystal caves. Today we examine one of the most puzzling species in our alliance, humanity. The lights dimmed. A 3-dimensional image of a human body rotated slowly in the air, surrounded by red warning indicators. He watched as familiar organs were highlighted one by one. Heart, lungs, brain, skin, each one marked with a danger symbol. As you can see, Wren continued, pointing to the display, humans possess what we classify as catastrophically vulnerable biology. Their skin measures only 2 to 3 millimeters thick in most areas. For comparison, a Vorsan's natural armor plating is 40 millimeters thick. A Quillen's crystalline structure is nearly impenetrable. A Helix ambassador in the 3rd row raised one of his 6 limbs. What about internal redundancy? Excellent question, Ambassador Torvin. Wren brought up another chart. Humans have single-point failure systems throughout their bodies. 1 heart, 1 brain, 2 lungs, but both are required for optimal function. No backup organs. No regeneration capability beyond minor wounds. Murmurs rippled through the audience. A Vorsan security officer shook his heavy armored head. How did such a species survive long enough to develop spaceflight? Yao almost smiled. That was always the question. How did fragile little humans make it off their planet when they were so easy to break? Wren cycled through more images. Their sensory organs are completely exposed. Eyes that can be damaged by bright light. Ears that can rupture from pressure changes. A sense of smell so weak it barely functions for survival purposes. And yet somehow they thrived. Perhaps their planet was unusually safe, suggested a doctor from the Pelian species, her 3 eyes blinking in sequence. Actually, the opposite. Wren pulled up an image of Earth, blue and green and beautiful, but the data streaming beside it told a different story. Earth has extreme temperature variations, regular seismic activity, volcanic eruptions, and frequent asteroid impacts. The planet's magnetic field weakens periodically, exposing the surface to dangerous radiation. By our standards, it should be classified as a death world. The audience fell silent. Death worlds were rare. Most intelligent species evolved on stable planets with consistent climates and few natural disasters. The idea that humans came from such a place seemed impossible given their apparent fragility. Yao shifted in his seat. He could explain it to them. He could tell them about adaptation, about flexibility, about the difference between surviving damage and preventing it. But he had learned that some lessons could not be taught with words. They had to be demonstrated. This raises an important question, Wren said, the crystals that made up his body refracting light in thoughtful patterns. Should humans be restricted from certain activities? Should they be barred from hazardous duty assignments? Their biology suggests they cannot withstand the rigors that other species take for granted. Before anyone could answer, an alarm cut through the lecture hall. Not the gentle chime of a schedule reminder, but the harsh wail of an emergency broadcast. The holographic display flickered and changed, showing a new image. A mining colony on a nearby moon. Red warnings flashing across every system. Ambassador Torvin was on his feet immediately, his communication device already active. "This is Torvin, report!" A panicked voice came through, belonging to the colony's manager. "Reactor breach in progress. Cooling system failed. We're evacuating now. But if someone doesn't trigger the emergency shutdown manually, the explosion will destroy half the moon and irradiate everything within 10,000 kilometers. How long until breach? 40 minutes. Maybe less." The lecture hall erupted into action. Scientists scattered, heading for duty stations. Torvin began shouting orders, coordinating with station security. Wren abandoned the presentation entirely, already calculating radiation exposure limits for different species. Yao stood slowly, his mind already working through the problem. He pulled out his personal tablet and accessed the public records for the mining colony. Floor plans, reactor specifications, radiation projections. His fingers moved quickly across the screen. Around him, the debate had already started. Who could survive the radiation long enough to reach the reactor controls? Quillans had natural resistance to radiation, but even they would suffer severe damage. Vestans had armor, but their internal organs were just as vulnerable as anyone else's. Hellions regenerated quickly, but not quickly enough to outpace acute radiation poisoning. Yao found what he was looking for. The reactor control room was located 300 meters from the breach point. The path there would take anyone through zones registering lethal radiation levels on the scanner. Lethal for every species represented in this room. We need to send someone, Captain Drumath of Station Security was saying, his voice in bulk making him impossible to ignore. Even if they don't survive, they might buy the evacuation more time. That's not acceptable, Torvin replied. We don't sacrifice people. Then what do you suggest? We can't reach it with drones. The radiation is already scrambling their electronics. Yao closed his tablet and moved toward the door. Nobody noticed him leaving. They were too busy arguing about acceptable loss, calculations and whether it was ethical to ask for volunteers when the volunteer would certainly die. He made his way through the curved corridors of the research station, past laboratories and living quarters, past observation windows that showed the moon where hundreds of people were right now scrambling for evacuation ships. 40 minutes, maybe less. The shuttle bay was nearly empty. Most of the security personnel were in the command center, dealing with the crisis. Yao walked to the medical shuttle section, scanning his credentials at the door. As a research scientist, he had access to most areas of the station. Nobody questioned a biologist wanting to prep a medical shuttle. That's what you did during evacuations. You got ready to treat survivors. Except Yao wasn't prepping the shuttle for survivors. He was prepping it for himself. He ran through the pre-flight checks quickly, his hand steady on the controls. The shuttle's computer asked him to confirm his destination. He entered the coordinates for the mining colony. The computer hesitated, then flashed a warning about radiation levels. Yao overrode it. By the time station security noticed what was happening, the shuttle was already launching, dropping away from the research station and angling toward the moon below. Yao's communication device lit up with incoming calls. Captain Drumath, Ambassador Torvin, Dr. Wren. He ignored them all. Instead, he opened a single channel back to the station. This is Dr. Yao Wen. I'm heading to the reactor site. Don't try to stop me. Use the time to get everyone else clear. Drumath's voice came through, angry and desperate. Yao, your biology profile says you can't survive this. The radiation will kill you in minutes. Yao checked his course, adjusted the shuttle's angle slightly. The moon grew larger in his viewport, its gray surface scarred by mining operations. I know what my biology profile says, he replied. Then he ended the transmission and focused on flying. Below him, Ground Zero waited. The shuttle shook as it hit the moon's thin atmosphere. Yao gripped the controls, watching the heat shields flare orange through the viewport. Behind him, on the research station, he knew chaos had erupted. They would be tracking his trajectory, calculating his chances, preparing for the worst. Let them calculate. Numbers on a screen had never told the whole story about humans. The mining colony spread out below him, a cluster of domed structures and industrial equipment carved into the gray rock. Most of it was dark now. The evacuation was in progress. Small ships were lifting off in groups heading for orbit and safety, but near the center of the complex, warning lights pulsed red. The reactor facility. That was where Yao needed to go. His communication console lit up again. This time he answered it. Wren's crystalline voice came through, strained with worry. Yao, please reconsider. The radiation levels are already at 4,000 millisieverts per hour and rising. That's enough to cause acute radiation syndrome in humans within 30 minutes of exposure. I know the numbers. Wren. Then you know this is suicide. Yao adjusted his approach angle, lining up with the colony's landing pad. I know what the medical textbooks say, but textbooks don't account for everything. Another voice cut in. Captain Drumath. We're sending a team. If you wait 20 minutes, we can have Quillan specialists equipped and ready to go. The reactor won't wait 20 minutes. Yao brought the shuttle down hard, landing gear crunching against the pad. It might not even wait 10. Then at least let us guide you through the facility, Drumouth said. We have the schematics here. Already downloaded them. Yao was moving now, unsealing the shuttle's hatch and pulling on the modified hazmat suit he had grabbed from the medical bay. It was not designed for this level of radiation, but it was better than nothing. Keep the channel open. I'll update you as I go. The hatch opened and Yao stepped out into the colony. The air was thin, barely breathable even with the suit's oxygen supply. Emergency lights cast everything in red. Sirens wailed from every direction, though there was no one left to hear them except Yao. The last evacuation ships were just disappearing over the horizon. He ran toward the reactor facility, his boots clanging on metal walkways. The entire colony seemed to be holding its breath. Equipment sat abandoned mid-operation. Doors hung open. A child's toy lay in the middle of a corridor, dropped in the panic. Radiation levels outside are now at 6,000 millisieverts, Ren reported. His voice was tight. Yao, that's lethal exposure. Not lethal yet, Yao corrected, checking the dosimeter on his wrist. The numbers were climbing, but he had been through worse. Not much worse, but worse. He thought of his grandfather, who had worked in the Chernobyl cleanup crews, who had walked into radiation that the world said no human could survive, who had lived another 30 years after that, long enough to see his grandson become a biologist. How are the evacuation ships doing? All personnel are clear of the immediate blast zone, but if that reactor goes, the radiation will spread across half the moon's surface. It'll make the whole area uninhabitable for decades. Yao reached the main reactor building and forced open the heavy door. Inside, the heat hit him like a physical wall. The cooling systems had failed completely. Without them, the reactor was cooking itself toward a meltdown. He could hear metal creaking, expanding from the temperature. Somewhere deep in the facility, something was hissing like a wounded animal. I'm inside the main structure, he reported, moving down a stairwell, heading for the control room. Be advised, Ambassador Torvin's voice joined the channel. Our sensors show 3 containment systems have already failed. The 4th is at 60% integrity and dropping fast. How long? Unknown. Could be 5 minutes. Could be 20. Helpful, Yao muttered, but he picked up his pace anyway. The stairwell seemed to go down forever, spiraling into the moon's interior where the reactor sat buried beneath layers of rock and steel. The radiation levels on his dosimeter were climbing faster now. 8,000 millisieverts. 9,000. The suit's warning system started beeping. On the research station, Ren was watching Yao's biotelemetry data on his screens. The human's heart rate was elevated, breathing fast from exertion, but otherwise the readings were normal. Too normal. At these radiation levels, cellular damage should already be occurring. DNA should be breaking apart, and yet Yao's vital signs remained stable. This doesn't make sense, Ren said aloud, not realizing his microphone was still active. What doesn't? Torvin asked. His bio readings. He should be showing signs of acute radiation damage by now. Cell death. Organ stress. But I'm seeing nothing unusual except elevated stress hormones, which is expected given the situation. Yao reached the bottom of the stairwell and pushed through another door. The control room was just ahead, down a long corridor lined with pipes and cables. Some of the pipes were glowing with heat. One had cracked, venting superheated steam across the passage. Yao studied the steam jet, timing its pulses, then darted through during a gap. Control room in sight, he reported. The doors to the control room had buckled from the heat but were still partially closed. Yao wedged his hands into the gap and pulled. The metal was hot even through his gloves. He could smell something burning, realized it was the outer layer of his suit starting to melt. He pulled harder, muscles straining, and the door grudged open enough for him to squeeze through. Inside, every screen was flashing red. The reactor status display showed a nightmare scenario. Cooling system offline. Temperature at 3,000 degrees and rising. Containment at 55% and falling. Yao moved to the main console and started pulling up the emergency shutdown protocols. I'm at the controls, he said, walking through the shutdown sequence now. But it was not that simple. The automated systems were fried. The backup systems had failed when the containment started breaking down. What Yao was looking at was a manual shutdown, which meant physically lowering the control rods into the reactor core. And the controls for that were not in this room. There's a problem, he said, reading through the diagnostic information. The manual override is in the reactor chamber itself. Silence on the channel. Then Ren's voice very quiet. Yes, so? The reactor chamber is at the center of the radiation field. The exposure there is fatal. Fatal is a relative term. No, it's not. The radiation in that chamber is so intense it will cause cellular collapse within seconds. Yao was already moving, leaving the control room and heading deeper into the facility. Then I'll have to work fast. He followed the signs toward the reactor chamber, descending another level. The walls here were lined with lead shielding, but he could feel the radiation even through it. A strange prickling sensation on his skin. His dosimeter had stopped giving specific readings. It just showed a flashing symbol that meant the exposure was beyond measurable limits. Captain Drumath's voice came through the channel, urgent. Yeah, we're begging you, turn back. You've done everything you can. No one expects more than this. It's not about expectations, Yao replied. It's about what needs to be done. He reached the reactor chamber door. It was a massive thing, designed to contain forces that could tear apart buildings, but it had a small access panel, intended for emergency maintenance. Hugh unsealed it and immediately his suit's alarms went wild. The radiation streaming through that opening was like staring into the sun. Yao thought about his grandfather again, about all the people who had walked into the fire when everyone said it was impossible, about what it meant to be human, really human, when the universe demanded more than survival. He took a breath, checked that the emergency toolkit was secure on his belt, and stepped through the access panel into the heart of the reactor. The radiation hit him like a hammer. Every cell in his body screamed. His vision went white at the edges, but he did not stop. He moved forward toward the manual control mechanism, hands already reaching for his tools. I'm in, he said, though his voice sounded strange even to himself. Starting the shutdown. On the research station, every doctor and scientist who had been watching the biotelemetry data saw Yao's vital signs spike wildly. Heart rate doubling, blood pressure soaring, core temperature rising, and then impossibly stabilizing, not at healthy levels but at levels that suggested his body was fighting, adapting, holding on. Ren stared at the screens in disbelief. He's still conscious, the Quillen whispered. At that exposure level, he should be dead already, but Yao was not dead. He was working, his hands moving with desperate speed across the manual controls, lowering the control rods one by one into the reactor core. Each one slowed the reaction, brought the temperature down, reduced the radiation output. His hands were shaking. His vision was blurring, but he kept going. The last control rod slid into place. The reactor's temperature began to drop. The radiation levels started to fall. The danger was passing. Yao allowed himself one moment of satisfaction. Then his legs gave out and he collapsed to the floor of the reactor chamber. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was the green light on the control panel, indicating shutdown complete. Yao woke to the sound of medical equipment beeping steadily beside his head. His entire body felt like it had been placed in a furnace and then beaten with hammers. Every breath hurt. Every tiny movement sent waves of pain across his skin. But he was breathing. He was moving. He was alive. He opened his eyes slowly, squinting against the bright lights of the medical bay. Through the transparent wall of the isolation chamber, he could see Dr. Ren standing at a console. Several other doctors gathered around. They were all staring at screens filled with data, their body language radiating confusion. Yao tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. He managed a small cough instead. Immediately, every head in the medical bay turned toward him. Ren moved so quickly his crystalline body blurred, rushing to the isolation chamber's communication panel. Yao, can you hear me? The Quillen's voice came through the speakers, pitched with an emotion Yao had never heard from him before. Fear, maybe, or wonder. Water, Yao croaked. Within minutes, a medical drone delivered a sealed container of water through the isolation chamber's airlock. Yao drank it slowly, feeling it soothe his burning throat. His hands were wrapped in bandages. So were his arms. When he looked down at himself, he realized most of his visible skin was covered in medical dressings. How long was I out? He asked. 18 hours, Ren replied. We retrieved you from the reactor chamber once the radiation levels dropped to survivable limits. You were unconscious. Third-degree burns across 40% of your body. Severe radiation poisoning. Cell damage that should have been irreparable. The doctor paused. Yao, we prepared for you to die. Or, at minimum, to require years of regeneration therapy. And yet here I am asking for breakfast. It was meant as a joke, but nobody laughed. The assembled medical staff just continued staring at him like he was some kind of impossible puzzle. A Pelian doctor with 3 eyes blinked all of them in sequence, a gesture of deep bewilderment. A Vorsan physician made a rumbling sound in his throat that might have been disbelief. "Are you in pain?" Ren asked. "Everything hurts," Yao admitted, "but it's manageable." "I felt worse." "You felt worse than acute radiation syndrome with severe burns?" "I broke my leg in 3 places during a rock climbing accident when I was 19. That hurt worse than this." Ren turned to his console, pulling up data streams that filled the air with glowing text and graphs. "Your cellular damage was extensive. When we scanned you 18 hours ago, we found dead and dying cells throughout your body, particularly in your blood, skin, and gastrointestinal tract. Classic acute radiation exposure pattern. And now we're seeing massive cellular regeneration. Your bone marrow is producing new blood cells at an extraordinary rate. Your damaged skin is already being replaced by new tissue. Even your internal organs are showing signs of rapid repair." Ren's voice took on a tone of frustration. "This should not be possible. It takes Pelians weeks to regenerate from this level of damage, and they have specialized biology designed for it. Quillans require months of crystalline restructuring. Forsans never fully recover, but you're doing it in hours." Yao shifted carefully in the bed, testing his range of motion. His muscles protested, but they worked. "Maybe you should scan me again." They did. For the next 3 hours, Yao was subjected to every medical test the research station had available. Cellular analysis, genetic sequencing, metabolic function studies, radiation exposure mapping. Through it all, he remained patient, answering questions and holding still while machines hummed and beeped around him. When the testing finally finished, Ren called for a meeting of the senior medical staff. Yao was allowed to listen through the isolation chamber's communication system, propped up in bed with more water and a meal that tasted like cardboard, but was apparently optimized for human nutrition during recovery. "The results are conclusive," Ren began, displaying a holographic image of Yao's DNA. "Human genetic code contains extensive error correction mechanisms, far more than any other species we've studied. Their cells are constantly checking for and repairing damage to their DNA." A Helix doctor raised one limb. "All species have some DNA repair capability. Not like this." Ren highlighted sections of the genetic code. "Human cells have multiple redundant repair pathways. If one system fails, another takes over. They're essentially repairing radiation damage as fast as it occurs. It's not perfect. Severe damage still kills them, but their tolerance threshold is far higher than our models predicted." "But why?" asked the Pelian doctor. "What evolutionary pressure would create such excessive repair systems?" A new voice joined the conversation. Dr. Hollis, a human physician who had just arrived on a fast courier ship from Earth, walked into the medical bay with the brisk efficiency of someone used to emergencies. She was older than Yao, with gray hair and eyes that had seen difficult things. She moved directly to Ren's console without bothering with introductions. "I can answer that," she said, pulling up an image of Earth. "Our planet is a radiation disaster by galactic standards. Always has been." The assembled doctors turned their attention to her. Hollis expanded the image, showing data streams about Earth's radiation environment. "Earth's magnetic field has weakened several times throughout our evolutionary history. During those periods, surface radiation increased dramatically. We also experienced multiple nearby supernova events that bathed our planet in cosmic rays. Add in natural radioactive elements in our environment, radon gas from rocks, radiation from space that constantly bombards our atmosphere. We evolved swimming in radiation that would hospitalize most of your species." Ren absorbed this information, his crystalline structure refracting the light in patterns that suggested deep thought. "You're saying humans are essentially adapted to survive constant low-level radiation exposure. Not just survive it, thrive despite it." Hollis brought up more data. "Every human on Earth absorbs between 2 and 7 millisieverts of radiation per year, just from natural background sources. More if they live at high altitude or in areas with radioactive rocks. Our bodies are constantly fighting and repairing that damage. We're all radiation survivors every day of our lives." "But the levels Yao was exposed to were far beyond background radiation," the Vorsan doctor objected. "The reactor chamber registered over 100,000 millisieverts per hour, which is why he collapsed and suffered severe damage," Hollis agreed. "Humans aren't immune to radiation. We're just better at recovering from it than you realized." Our cellular repair mechanisms can handle massive insults if given time to work. She walked to the isolation chamber and looked at Yao through the transparent wall. He raised one bandaged hand in a small wave. Hollis smiled slightly, then turned back to the other doctors. What you classified as fragility was actually resilience. You looked at human biology and saw thin skin, vulnerable organs, lack of armor. You measured our ability to prevent damage. But that was never our evolutionary strategy. She gestured to Yao. We didn't evolve to avoid being hurt. We evolved to get hurt and keep going anyway. Ren approached the isolation chamber as well, studying Yao with new understanding. The medical literature we reviewed focused on human vulnerability to immediate threats. Puncture wounds, blunt force trauma, toxins. We saw how easily humans could be injured. And you missed what happened after the injury, Hollis finished. We heal, faster and more completely than your models predicted. Because on Earth, if you couldn't heal quickly, you died. Our planet doesn't coddle weakness. Ambassador Torvin, who had been quietly observing from the back of the room, stepped forward. Dr. Hollis, are you saying that Earth is more dangerous than most habitable worlds? I'm saying Earth has killed 99% of every species that ever lived there. Mass extinctions, ice ages, asteroid impacts, volcanic winters, magnetic field reversals, gamma ray bursts from space. Our planet is a shooting gallery, and we're the species that survived by being tough enough to take the hits and adaptable enough to change with every punch. The room fell silent as the implications of this sank in. These doctors, these scientists, had spent their careers studying biology across dozens of species. They understood evolutionary pressure. They knew that environment shaped adaptation. But they had never considered that a species could evolve not to avoid danger, but to survive it through sheer stubborn resilience. Yao's voice came through the speakers, still rough, but gaining strength. Every species in this galaxy evolved to fit their world. You all came from stable planets with consistent conditions. You developed according to environments that rewarded specialization and efficiency. We came from a world that kept trying to kill us in new and creative ways. We developed accordingly. Ren turned to face him fully. I called humans fragile in my presentation. You did. I was wrong. You're not fragile at all. You're flexible. There's a difference, Yao agreed. Fragile things shatter when stressed. Flexible things bend, absorb the impact, and spring back, sometimes stronger than before. Hollis pulled up one more image on the display, a graph showing human population growth over the last 100,000 years. It was not a smooth line. It showed bottlenecks, near extinctions, moments where humanity teetered on the edge of oblivion. But it never reached zero. The line always recovered, always climbed higher. We've been through fire before, Hollis said quietly. Literally and figuratively. A few thousand years ago, a supervolcano almost wiped us out. Our population dropped to maybe 10,000 individuals. By all rights, we should have gone extinct. But we didn't. We adapted. We survived. We came back stronger. She looked around at the assembled aliens, these beings from safe worlds who had never known existential threat after existential threat. That's what you need to understand about humans. We break easily, yes. We get hurt, we suffer, we die. But before we die, we fight. And if we survive, we heal. And if we heal, we remember, and we get better at surviving next time. She smiled, and there was something fierce in it. You called us fragile because you measured strength by what we can withstand. You didn't realize that strength is what you do after you break. Yao lay in his isolation chamber, listening to this, feeling the pain in his body and the exhaustion in his bones. In a few weeks, he would be fully healed. The burns would fade. The radiation damage would be repaired. He would be ready to go back to work, back to his research, back to his life. Because that was what humans did. They walked through fire, survived the unsurvivable, and then asked what was next. 1 week after the reactor incident, Dr. Ren stood once again before a lecture hall full of scientists. The same hall where he had presented his findings on human fragility. Many of the same faces looked back at him from the seats, but everything had changed. Yao sat in the front row this time, no longer content to hide in the back. His hands still showed the pink marks of new skin where the burns had been worst. He moved a bit stiffly and he tired easily, but he was there, alive and recovering at a rate that continued to baffle the medical staff. Thank you for returning, Ren began. His crystalline voice carried clearly through the space, but there was a different tone to it now. Humility, perhaps. I asked you all here because I need to correct a significant error in my previous presentation. The holographic display activated, showing the same human body diagram as before. But this time the red warning indicators were gone. In their place were green highlights and detailed annotations. I told you that humans were catastrophically vulnerable. I said their thin skin, single organ systems, and exposed sensory organs made them unsuitable for hazardous environments. I was wrong on every count. A murmur ran through the audience. Scientists did not like being wrong, but they liked uncorrected errors even less. Ren continued, pulling up new data. Human skin is not a weakness. It's a sophisticated organ that serves multiple functions simultaneously. Yes, it's thin compared to armor plating or crystalline structures, but that thinness allows for superior heat regulation, enhanced sensory input, and rapid healing. Thick armor is strong until it cracks. Then it's catastrophic. Thin skin can be damaged easily, but it repairs itself in days. He showed cellular imagery, time-lapse footage of human skin cells regenerating after injury. The speed was remarkable compared to other species. What took weeks for a Vorsan took days for a human. Their single-organ systems are not design flaws. They're efficiency optimizations. A human heart pumps blood more effectively than the three-heart system of a Pelion. It uses less energy and takes up less space. Yes, losing that heart is fatal, but the human body protects it with redundant blood vessels, collateral circulation, and remarkable regenerative capacity in surrounding tissues. Ambassador Torvin raised a limb from his seat in the third row. But what about redundancy? If a human's heart stops, they die. If one of my three hearts fails, I continue functioning. Ren nodded. A fair point. But consider this. How much energy does your body spend maintaining three hearts? How much blood volume is required? How much space in your chest cavity is dedicated to redundant organs? Humans allocated those resources elsewhere. To a larger brain, to more muscle mass, to sophisticated immune systems. They made a trade-off and it worked. He pulled up more data, this time showing human endurance capabilities. Humans can run for hours without stopping. Not quickly, but persistently. This is nearly unique among terrestrial predators. They can regulate their body temperature through sweating, allowing them to chase prey until it collapses from heat exhaustion. They sacrificed armor and redundancy for stamina and adaptability. Dr. Hollis stood from her seat next to Yao. May I add something? Ren gestured for her to approach the stage. Hollis walked up, moving with the confidence of someone who had spent years teaching. She pulled up a new image. Earth, rotating slowly, its blue and green surface deceptively peaceful. You need to understand where humans come from to understand what we are. Earth is classified in your databases as a Class 7 extreme environment world. Most of you wouldn't survive a week on the surface without significant technological support. She zoomed in on different regions of the planet. Temperature swings of 50 degrees Celsius or more depending on season and location. Gravity at 1G, which is higher than most habitable worlds. An oxygen-nitrogen atmosphere at sea level that seems normal, until you realize it also contains pollutants, pathogens, and allergens constantly. Natural radiation from the sun and cosmic sources. Frequent severe weather including hurricanes, tornadoes, and electrical storms. A Quillan scientist in the audience spoke up. But many worlds have challenging conditions. What makes Earth exceptional? The combination and frequency, Hollis replied. Earth doesn't have one or two major challenges. It has dozens all at once all the time, and they change. Our climate shifts, our magnetic field weakens and strengthens, supervolcanoes erupt, asteroids impact, ice ages come and go. Species that couldn't adapt died. We're descended from the ones who could adapt to anything. She showed genetic data now, highlighting the repair mechanisms that Ren had discussed in earlier briefings with the medical staff. Every human carries genes from multiple human subspecies that went extinct. We interbred with them, absorbed their adaptations, took their strengths and made them ours. We're genetic survivors pieced together from multiple lineages that each solved the problem of surviving Earth in different ways. Yao stood, moving carefully to join them on the stage. He looked out at the audience of alien scientists, many of whom had spent the last week studying him, like he was a fascinating specimen, which he supposed he was. I want to be clear about something, he said. I'm not special. What I did at the reactor, what my body did to survive that radiation, that's not unique to me. Any human could have done it. Any human has the same repair mechanisms, the same resilience, the same stubborn refusal to die that I showed. He gestured to his healing hands. Yes, I was hurt. Yes, I nearly died. But the key word there is nearly. I walked into a radiation field that your medical text said was instantly lethal to humans. And I didn't die. Because humans are very, very hard to kill completely. Captain Drewmath stood from his seat in the back. The Vorsan security chief had been quiet since the incident, clearly troubled by something. I need to apologize, he said, his voice rough. I dismissed you, Dr. Yao. When the crisis began, I didn't even consider sending a human to help. I assumed you were too fragile to be useful. I was a fool. You were working with incomplete information, Yao replied. We all were. The galaxy has been classifying species based on damage prevention instead of damage recovery. It's an understandable mistake. Ren pulled up a new chart, this one showing reclassified human durability ratings. Based on Dr. Yao's survival and our subsequent research into human biology and evolution, the Galactic Medical Council is officially reclassifying humans as adaptive resilient species, extreme category. This is a new classification we're creating specifically for species that survive through recovery rather than resistance. The hall buzzed with conversation. A new classification was significant. It meant rewriting textbooks, updating medical protocols, and reconsidering everything they thought they knew about biological durability. What does this mean practically? Asked a Pelian doctor from the middle rows. Dr. Hollis answered, It means humans should be considered for roles we were previously excluded from. Hazardous environment work, disaster response, high radiation areas, not because we're immune to danger, but because we can survive exposure that would permanently disable other species, then recover and go back to work. It also means, Ren added, that we need to study other species with fresh perspectives. How many other civilizations have we misclassified? How many strengths have we overlooked because we were measuring the wrong things? Ambassador Torvin stood, his 6 limbs moving in a gesture of formal address. The Galactic Council will need to review our entire approach to biological classification. This isn't just about humans. It's about ensuring we understand the true capabilities and limitations of all species in our alliance. He turned to face Yao directly. Dr. Yao, I owe you more than an apology. I owe you my thanks. The mining colony evacuation succeeded because you bought us time. 417 people are alive because you walked into that reactor. But more than that, you taught us something crucial about not judging species by their surface characteristics. You felt uncomfortable with the praise. He had done what needed doing. Nothing more. I just want to make sure we learn the right lesson here. I'm not a hero. I'm a product of 4 billion years of evolution on a planet that killed everything that couldn't adapt. Any human would have made the same choice I did. That's not humility, Ren said quietly. That's the truth. And it's terrifying. The Quillen doctor pulled up one final image, a graph showing human population spread across Earth over the last 200,000 years. It showed humans migrating into deserts, tundra, mountains, jungles, islands, into every ecological niche the planet offered, thriving in environments that ranged from below freezing to scorching hot, from sea level to high altitude, from wet to dry. Humans don't have natural armor, but they conquered their entire planet anyway. They don't have redundant organs, but they survive injuries that would kill most of us. They don't have built-in radiation resistance, but one of them walked through a nuclear reactor core and lived to tell about it. Ren's crystalline structure flickered with something that might have been respect, or might have been fear. They're not fragile. They're arguably the most durable species we've ever encountered. We just had to redefine what durability means. The lecture ended with more questions than answers, but that was how good science worked. The audience filed out slowly, many stopping to speak with Yao, to examine his healing injuries, to ask about human capabilities and limitations. Yao answered their questions patiently, but his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about Earth, about the grandfather who had walked through Chernobyl's ruins, about the countless humans throughout history who had survived impossible things and then kept going. They called humans fragile. But fragile things shattered and could not be put back together. Humans bent, broke, bled, and then healed. That was not fragility. That was something else entirely. Something the galaxy was only beginning to understand. As the hall emptied, Ren approached Yao one more time. I have a question, if you don't mind. Of course. When you were in that reactor chamber experiencing radiation that should have killed you instantly, what were you thinking? Yao considered the question. He remembered the pain, The fear, the desperate focus on the manual controls. But underneath all that, there had been something else. Something very human. I was thinking that I've come too far to die here. That humanity has survived too much for too long to be stopped by radiation. That my grandfather survived Chernobyl, so I could damn well survive this. He smiled slightly. Mostly I was thinking that someone had to do it, and I was already there, so it might as well be me. Ren's crystalline structure reflected the overhead lights in complex patterns. That's the most human thing I've ever heard. Good, Yao replied. Because I have a feeling the galaxy is going to need to get used to hearing human things more often. We're not going anywhere. We're too stubborn for that. 2 weeks after Dr. Ren's corrected presentation, the ripple effects were spreading across the galaxy faster than anyone had anticipated. News of the human who survived Ground Zero had reached every major world in the Galactic Council. The story grew with each retelling, but the core facts remained unchanged. A human had walked into lethal radiation, completed an impossible task, and lived. Yao was learning that fame was exhausting. His personal communication device received dozens of interview requests daily. Scientists wanted to study him. Military organizations wanted to recruit him. News outlets wanted his story. He declined most of them, preferring to return to his actual work in the research station's biology labs. But the galaxy had other plans. The Galactic Council called an emergency session to discuss human reclassification. He was required to attend, along with Dr. Hollis, Ambassador Torvin, and Dr. Ren. They gathered in the council chambers, a massive space station orbiting a neutron star, where representatives from 47 different species made decisions that shaped galactic policy. Yao had never been in the council chambers before. The architecture was designed to accommodate wildly different body types and environmental needs. Some delegates sat in water-filled tanks. Others occupied high-temperature zones kept separate by energy barriers. A few floated in zero-gravity sections, their gaseous forms contained by magnetic fields. The session began with Ambassador Torvin presenting the medical findings. Holographic displays showed Yao's cellular recovery, genetic analysis, and comparative data with other species. The assembled delegates watched in silence as the evidence mounted. Humans were not what the galaxy had believed them to be. When the presentation ended, the questions began. A delegate from the Helix Confederation spoke first, his 6 limbs gesturing in formal patterns. If humans possess this level of resilience, why were they not identified as such during initial contact protocols? Surely our scientists would have noticed these capabilities. Dr. Hollis stood to answer. Your scientists did notice. They documented human healing rates, radiation tolerance, and adaptability, but they classified these as normal for a Class 7 world species. The error was in assuming that Class 7 species would be too fragile for standard galactic environments. No one tested whether humans might actually be more durable than species from gentler worlds. A Vorsan military commander, her armor plating gleaming under the chamber lights, spoke next. Are there other human capabilities we've overlooked? If we missed something this significant, what else don't we know? Many things, Hollis admitted. Human endurance running, for instance. We can move continuously for hours, even days, at a sustainable pace. Most predator species sprint quickly but tire fast. Humans evolved to exhaust prey through persistence. There's also our adaptability to different gravity levels, our pain tolerance, our ability to function with injuries that would incapacitate others. Yao watched the delegates process this information. He could see the calculations happening behind their eyes. Military applications, resource allocation, strategic implications. The galaxy was realizing that Earth had been hiding warriors in plain sight, disguised as fragile scientists and diplomats. A Quillan counselor, her crystalline structure reflecting rainbow patterns, raised a concern. This raises questions about other Class 7 worlds. If humans can thrive in galactic society despite their harsh origin, what about species from Class 8 or Class 9 deathworlds? Should we be reconsidering our contact protocols? That's a broader discussion, Torvin interjected. Today we're focused on human reclassification. But yes, the Exploration Committee should review our assumptions about habitability ratings and biological durability. The debate continued for hours. Some delegates worried about military implications. Others saw opportunities for collaboration. A few expressed concern that humans had been deliberately hiding their capabilities, though Hollis quickly dismissed that notion. We didn't hide anything. she said firmly. We filled out your medical questionnaires honestly. Can humans be injured easily? Yes. Do we have thin skin? Yes. Do we lack armor and redundant organs? Yes, all of that is true. You just assumed those facts meant we were fragile. We never made that claim. You did. During a recess, Yao stepped out onto an observation deck that overlooked the neutron star. The stellar remnant spun rapidly, beaming radiation across space in sweeping pulses. Beautiful and deadly. Like Earth in a way. Captain Drumath found him there, the Vorsan's heavy footsteps announcing his approach. I've been thinking about something you said during the medical presentation, Drumath began, about how any human could have done what you did. It's true. I believe you. But that's what concerns me. Drumath looked out at the neutron star, his armored face unreadable. I command security for a research station with thousands of personnel. When a crisis occurs, I need to know who can handle what situations. I thought I understood species capabilities. Now I'm realizing I know nothing about humans. Yao considered this. What do you want to know? Everything. How much damage can humans take before they stop functioning? How do you keep going with injuries that would hospitalize my people? What are your actual limits? Those are complicated questions. Then help me understand. Drumath turned to face him directly. The galaxy needs to know what humans can really do. Not just for military purposes, though yes, that matters, but for everything. Rescue operations, medical emergencies, exploration. If we're going to work together, we need accurate information. Yao appreciated the honesty. All right. Humans can function with broken bones. We can work through injuries that cause significant pain. We can lose up to 40% of our blood volume and survive if we get treatment. We can go days without sleep, weeks without food, 3 days without water. We can adapt to temperature extremes, high and low gravity, toxic atmospheres with proper equipment. We can recover from burns, radiation exposure, severe trauma, and infections that would kill most species. Drumath listened, his expression growing more troubled with each capability listed. And the limits? We die if our brain is destroyed. We die if our heart stops for too long without intervention. We die from sufficient trauma, poison, disease, or environmental exposure. We're not invincible. We're just resilient. Yao paused. The real limit isn't physical. It's will. Humans can push through pain and injury as long as we have a reason to keep going. Take away that reason and we collapse. Give us a reason, and we'll crawl through fire. What was your reason? In the reactor. 417 people who needed time to evacuate. Drumath made a rumbling sound deep in his chest. If I had known when the crisis began what you were capable of, I would have sent you immediately. Instead, I wasted time debating while you took matters into your own hands. You made the best decision with the information available. That's generous. I made an assumption based on prejudice. The Vorsan security chief looked out at the spinning star again. My people evolved on a stable world with few predators. We developed armor to protect against the dangers we faced. When we look at other species, we see strength in armor and size. We missed that strength can also mean recovering from wounds quickly, or pushing through pain that would stop us cold. The observation deck's door opened, and Dr. Wren joined them, his crystalline form chiming softly with each step. The council is reconvening. They're ready to vote on human reclassification. Back in the chambers, the delegates had reached a consensus. The vote was nearly unanimous. Humans would be reclassified as adaptive resilient species, extreme category. The classification came with new recommendations for human participation in galactic activities. A formal document was read aloud, its provisions both recognizing human capabilities and establishing guidelines for their deployment. Humans would be eligible for hazardous duty assignments previously restricted to armored or radiation-resistant species. Human medical personnel would be recruited for trauma response teams. Human consultants would review safety protocols to ensure they accounted for resilience-based durability rather than just resistance-based durability. But there was more. The Council also acknowledged that humans had been systematically undervalued and underutilized since joining the galactic community. Reparations would be made in the form of expanded research funding, technology sharing, and formal apologies from institutions that had dismissed human capabilities. Ambassador Torvin stood to deliver closing remarks. Today we correct an error that could have cost lives. If Dr. Yao Wen had accepted our assessment of his species as too fragile for hazardous duty, 417 beings would have died in the reactor explosion. Instead, he ignored our prejudice and demonstrated what humans truly are: survivors. The chamber erupted in varied forms of applause. Some species clicked appendages, others emitted harmonic tones, a few flashed bioluminescent patterns. It was a strange moment, being celebrated for simply doing what needed to be done. Yao felt uncomfortable with the attention, but he understood its importance. The galaxy needed this moment, this recognition that they had been wrong. After the session ended, Yao found himself surrounded by delegates wanting to speak with him personally. Military officers asked about human combat capabilities. Scientists requested permission to study human volunteers. Explorers wondered if humans would join deep space expeditions to hostile environments. Through it all, Yao remained patient, answering questions and correcting misconceptions. Yes, humans were durable. No, they weren't invincible. Yes, they could survive harsh conditions. No, they didn't seek out danger unnecessarily. Yes, they healed quickly. No, that didn't mean they enjoyed being injured. Dr. Hollis eventually rescued him, pulling him away from the crowd with the practiced efficiency of someone used to managing overwhelming situations. "You need rest," she said firmly. "You're still recovering, and these people will talk your ear off if you let them. They're curious. They're overwhelming. Come on. I'm prescribing you a meal and 8 hours of sleep, doctor's orders." As they left the council chambers, Yao looked back at the assembled delegates, still deep in discussion about the implications of human reclassification. The galaxy was changing its mind about humanity. That was good, necessary, but it was also just the beginning. "They're going to expect things from us now," Yao said quietly. "Now that they know what we can do, they'll call on us when situations get dangerous." "Good," Hollis replied. "Humans have been trying to prove ourselves since we joined the galactic community. Now we don't have to prove anything. They've seen what we are. Now we just have to decide what we want to do with that knowledge." Yao Kim thought about the reactor chamber, about the radiation and the pain and the desperate race to complete the shutdown before his body gave out completely. He thought about his grandfather, about all the humans throughout history who had walked into danger because someone had to, and they were already there. "We'll do what we always do," he said. "We'll help where we're needed, survive what we have to survive, and keep moving forward. That's what humans do." "That's what survivors do," Hollis corrected. "And it's about time the galaxy recognized us as such." In the days that followed, the news spread across every world, every station, every ship in galactic space. Humans were not fragile. Humans were not weak. Humans were survivors from a death world, adapted to endure catastrophes that would wipe out gentler species. The galaxy was learning what Earth had always known: that humanity's greatest strength was not in avoiding damage, but in taking the hit and getting back up again. And somewhere in the Galactic Council's vast bureaucracy, forms were being updated, medical texts were being rewritten, and protocols were being revised to reflect a new understanding. The humans had arrived, not as the fragile newcomers everyone assumed, but as the survivors they had always been. 3 months after the reactor incident, Yao stood in the same observation deck where he had first spoken with Captain Drumath. The view had not changed. The neutron star still spun in its eternal dance, still pulsed its radiation across the void. But everything else was different. The research station had doubled its human staff. Where Yao had once been the only human biologist, there were now 15 human researchers across various disciplines. The station's medical bay had been upgraded, with equipment specifically designed for human physiology. The cafeteria now served food that actually tasted like something humans would recognize. Small changes, but they mattered. Dr. Ren approached from behind, his crystalline footsteps announcing his presence. The Quillen researcher had become something of a friend over the past months. Funny how nearly dying together, even in different ways, could bond people. "The memorial ceremony starts in an hour," Ren said. "Are you ready?" "As ready as I'll ever be." They were dedicating a memorial on the mining colony moon. Not for deaths, thankfully, but for survival. A monument to the 417 workers who had escaped because someone bought them enough time. Yao still felt strange about being the center of such attention. He had done what needed doing. Nothing more. I've been reviewing the AI data from the past 3 months, Ren continued, joining Yao at the viewport. 43 human specialists have been assigned to hazardous duty stations across the galaxy. 17 more are in training for deep space exploration to high radiation environments. The Galactic Medical Corps has recruited 32 human trauma specialists. That fast? The Council moves quickly when they realize they've been wasting resources. Humans are in high demand now. Ren's crystalline structure refracted the starlight in contemplative patterns. I've also been reviewing incident reports from those assignments. Do you know how many humans have been seriously injured in the line of duty over the past 3 months? How many? 11. Do you know how many recovered and returned to active duty? Yao had a feeling he knew where this was going. All of them? All of them. Broken bones, radiation burns, chemical exposure, blunt force trauma. Every single one recovered in a fraction of the time my original medical models predicted. Ren turned to face him. You weren't an exception, Yao. You were an example. Every human demonstrates the same resilient biology you did. We told you that from the beginning. I know. I didn't believe it. I thought you were exaggerating out of pride or ignorance. Now I understand that humans don't exaggerate their capabilities. If anything, you understate them. Ren paused. Why do you do that? Why are humans so reluctant to claim credit for your own strengths? Yao considered the question. It was something he had noticed in other humans too. This tendency to downplay their own accomplishments. Maybe because we measure ourselves against other humans, not against other species. When I walked into that reactor, I wasn't thinking about how impressive it was compared to what a Quillen could do. I was thinking about whether I could match what my grandfather did at Chernobyl. Humans always have a higher bar to reach because we're comparing ourselves to the best humans who came before us. That must be exhausting. It's motivating. We stand on the shoulders of survivors. We inherit their strength and their responsibility to keep going. The door opened again and Captain Drumeth entered, accompanied by Ambassador Torvin. The Vorsan and Helix had both been instrumental in pushing through the policy changes that followed human reclassification. Drumeth had personally advocated for human inclusion in security forces. Torvin had fought for expanded human representation in council affairs. The shuttle is ready, Torvin announced. The colony manager says they're prepared for our arrival. The 4 of them traveled together to the mining colony, descending through the moon's thin atmosphere to land at the rebuilt facility. The colony had recovered remarkably well. New domes had been constructed to replace damaged ones. The reactor sat safely dormant, encased in additional shielding and scheduled for eventual decommissioning. Life had returned to normal, or as normal as things could be after a near disaster. The memorial had been erected just outside the reactor facility, where the radiation levels were finally low enough for safe, brief visits. It was a simple structure, elegant in its minimalism. A wall of polished metal engraved with the names of every worker who had been evacuated that day. And at the center a plaque with words in multiple languages, human and alien alike. On this day when catastrophe threatened hundreds of lives, one person walked into the fire so others could reach safety. This memorial honors not just that act of courage, but the truth it revealed, that strength comes in many forms, and survival is itself a kind of power. Below the words was a relief sculpture showing a figure in a hazmat suit, standing before a reactor door. No face was visible deliberately. It could be anyone. It could be any human. The ceremony was simple. The colony manager spoke about the evacuation, about the panic and fear and desperate scramble to save lives. Workers came forward one by one to thank Yao personally, though many were in tears and could barely speak. He accepted their gratitude with quiet dignity, uncomfortable with the attention but understanding their need to express it. Then it was Yao's turn to speak. He stood before the assembled crowd, 200 people who had returned to live and work on this moon, plus dozens more joining via video link from across the system. He had prepared remarks, but looking at their faces, he abandoned his script. I did not do anything special, he began. I know that sounds like false modesty, but it's not. I did what any human would have done in that situation. I saw people in danger. I saw a solution that required someone to take a risk, and I was already there. So I took the risk. He gestured to the memorial wall behind him. Every name on this wall represents someone who survived, because people work together. The engineers who kept systems running as long as possible, the coordinators who organized the evacuation, the pilots who flew ships in dangerous conditions, the station personnel who guided us through the crisis. I was one small part of that effort. You almost died, someone called from the crowd. I almost died, Yao agreed. But I didn't. And that's the part I want you to remember. Not that I was brave or heroic. That I survived. Because that's what humans do. We survive things that should kill us. We walk into danger when necessary. We take damage and heal. We break and rebuild. That's not special. That's just human. He paused, looking at the faces in the crowd. Humans and aliens alike. All of them survivors of that terrifying day. For too long, the galaxy saw humans as fragile. They looked at our thin skin and single hearts and lack of armor, and they assumed we were weak. They were measuring the wrong things. Strength is not about how much damage you can prevent. It's about how much damage you can survive and keep going anyway. Dr. Wren stepped forward to speak next, representing the medical community's perspective. When I first studied human biology, I saw failure points. Now I see flexibility. I saw vulnerability. Now I see adaptability. The galaxy owes humanity an apology for our blindness, but more importantly, we owe you our gratitude for your patience while we learned. The ceremony continued with more speeches, but Yao's mind drifted. He thought about Earth, about the billions of humans who would never know their biology had once been classified as catastrophically fragile. They just lived their lives surviving whatever came their way because that was what you did. You got up each day and faced the world, and when the world hit back, you absorbed the blow and kept moving. After the ceremony, Yao walked to the reactor facility one last time. The building was sealed now, waiting for decommissioning crews, but he could still see the entrance to the chamber where he had nearly died. The place where he had proven to himself and to the galaxy what humans were capable of enduring. Dr. Hollis found him there, materializing at his elbow with her usual impeccable timing. Reflecting on your mortality? Something like that. The medical journals are still publishing papers about your survival. Comparative studies, genetic analyses, theoretical models of human resilience. You've become the most studied human in galactic history. Lucky me, I'm serious. Your experience is changing how we understand biology itself. The assumption that thicker armor means better survival is being challenged across multiple disciplines. Evolutionary biologists are reconsidering development on harsh worlds. Medical researchers are studying damage recovery instead of just damage prevention. You started a revolution, Yao. I just wanted to stop a reactor from melting down. And in doing so, you showed the galaxy what it means to be human. Hollis looked at the sealed facility, at the monument beyond it. We're not the strongest species. We're not the fastest or the smartest or the most advanced, but we might be the hardest to kill completely. And in a dangerous universe, that counts for something. They stood in silence for a moment. Two humans on an alien moon, survivors of a world that had tried to kill their ancestors for millions of years and failed. Earth had forged them in fire and radiation and catastrophe. The galaxy was only now beginning to understand what that meant. They're calling more humans to serve, Hollis said. Exploration missions to dangerous worlds. Research stations in high radiation zones. Disaster response teams. The Council wants humans everywhere they expect trouble. Because they finally understand we can handle it. More than handle it. Thrive in it. Excel at it, she smiled slightly. Earth trained us well. The galaxy is just our proving ground now. Yao thought about the future, about all the humans who would follow where he had gone. Into danger, into uncertainty, into situations where survival was not guaranteed but was always possible. They would break, some of them. They would be hurt, scarred, changed by their experiences. But they would survive. That was what humans did. Come on, Hollis said, turning back toward the shuttle. We have work to do. The research station received 3 new hazardous material shipments that need cataloging. And apparently humans are now the preferred species for handling anything the safety protocols label as extremely dangerous. Of course we are. They walked back together, leaving the memorial behind but carrying its lesson forward. The galaxy had called humans fragile, and humans had proven them wrong not through argument but through action. not by claiming to be strong but by surviving what should have been unsurvivable. Back on the research station, life continued its new rhythm. Humans worked alongside dozens of other species. No longer the odd, fragile creatures who needed special protection. They were colleagues, equals, valued for their unique abilities rather than limited by their perceived weaknesses. Yao returned to his laboratory, to his research on comparative biology and adaptation. But now his work had new meaning. He was not just studying how species evolved to fit their environments. He was documenting how the galaxy was evolving to understand that strength came in many forms. That evening, he stood once more at the observation deck, watching ships come and go from the station's docking ports. More human ships than before, more human faces in the corridors, more human voices in the labs and cafeterias and meeting rooms. Earth's children were spreading across the galaxy. And the galaxy was finally ready to accept them not as fragile newcomers, but as the survivors they had always been. Dr. Wren joined him one last time, the Quillen's presence now familiar and welcome. "I've been thinking about what you said at the memorial, about humans surviving things that should kill them. And I realize now that's not just a biological trait. It's a philosophical one. Humans don't see survival as passive. For my species, survival means avoiding danger. For yours, survival means confronting danger and enduring it. That's a fundamental difference in worldview." Yao nodded slowly. "Maybe that's what Earth taught us, that you can't avoid danger forever. It finds you eventually, so you might as well learn to walk through fire and come out the other side. The galaxy is lucky to have you," Wren said quietly. "All of you, humans. The galaxy has us," Yao replied. "Whether it's luck or something else, that's for history to decide." He looked out at the stars, at the vast expanse of space that humans were now claiming as their own. Not through conquest or domination, but through simple, stubborn presence. They were here. They were surviving. They were thriving. And they would continue doing so no matter what the universe threw at them. They called humans fragile. They had been wrong. And in being wrong, they had learned something precious. That true strength was not in the armor you wore, but in the ability to take off that armor, walk into danger, and emerge still standing on the other side. That was humanity's gift to the galaxy. Not invincibility, but resilience. Not the prevention of damage, but the recovery from it. Not the avoidance of breaking, but the art of healing stronger than before. And as the stars wheeled overhead, and the neutron star pulsed its ancient rhythm, Yao Wen understood that this was only the beginning. The galaxy had seen what one human could survive. Now it would learn what all humans could accomplish when survival was just the starting point. The fragile species had proven itself unbreakable, and the universe would never look at humanity the same way again.